Hi everyone, this is Alan Stout, Executive Director of Visit Luzerne County, and welcome to Next Stop, the Visit Luzerne County podcast. Here, each month, we'll be chatting with people from throughout northeastern Pennsylvania that help make our region a fun place to visit. We record the podcast right here at our office, inside the historic train station in Wilkes-Barre, which served as the next stop for countless trains for more than 100 years. Our next stop with our podcast will always be with someone we think you'll find interesting. Enjoy. Hi everybody, I'm Alan Stout from Visit Luzerne County, and welcome to Next Stop, the Visit Luzerne County podcast, episode number 10. We are here today with Tony Brooks, who is the director and curator of the Wilkes-Barre Preservation Society, and Mark Riccetti, who is the director of operations and programs at the Luzerne County Historical Society. And we've wanted to have you both on the podcast for a while now, since we launched it last year. And then, because we are in the process right now of launching the new Visit Luzerne County History Trail, we thought it would be a lot of fun to have you both in together. And so I'll tell the folks that are watching and listening a little bit about it. Here at the Visitors Bureau, we've done a couple of trails over the last few years. We did the Visit Luzerne County Beer Trail, where you could see all of the great craft breweries throughout the region. We did the Visit Luzerne County Ice Cream Trail, and the Visit Luzerne County Pizza Trail, which was extremely popular.
Gosh, now I'm hungry.
Yeah, why did we record this, right now? Now I want to eat. Come on.
Well, we can still hit those trails.
Yeah.
And so for our fourth trail that we've done, it's a history trail, and we're really excited about it. There are 45 stops on this trail, and it provides folks with the opportunity to go out and look at these historical sites and learn a little bit about them and have some fun and check in and win some prizes. So we've got 45 stops on this trail. Some of the more iconic ones are obvious. Obviously, the Wyoming Monument is there, and the Dennison House, and the Swetland Home, and Eckley's Miners Village. But there's also some like, the FDR Monument in Sugar Notch, which was the first monument ever to FDR in the United States. The Babe Ruth Kiosk in Kirby Park, the Hubert Breaker, the Planters Peanuts site where the company was formed on South Main Street. And so, Tony and Mark, first of all, I want to thank you both for being here and for helping us put this trail together, because we had a couple of meetings with both of you, and as we were looking for suggestions on places to stop, obviously we wanted both of your expertise, and so we appreciate you being a part of this trail. And you both have the list in front of you. Talk to us about some of the other places on this trail that you think might be of interest and why you think that they made the list.
Well, first of all, the checks in the mail for saying Dennison and Swetland are iconic, by the way. Thank you for that. But no, this goes back to something you and I talked about, Alan, at the Delaware and Lehigh Christmas party last month, that there is something in this area for everyone. It doesn't matter if you like Revolutionary War history. It doesn't matter if you like industrial history, commercial history, sports history. There is something on this list for everyone. For me, I would encourage people to check out the Planters Peanuts, the Oba Marker on South Main Street. Mr. Peanut is beyond an American icon. He's been in multiple Super Bowl ads. He was voiced by Robert Downey Jr. At one point. He's all over the world. And it started right here in the city. So that's definitely one that I would recommend that people check out. And the USS Wilkes-Barre, the anchor, we have that on here. It's on the River Common. It's by the courthouse. The USS Wilkes-Barre was part of the WASP cruiser group. It was a World War II light cruiser. And the WASP group, the Wilkes-Barre, the Astoria, I think it was the Sacramento and the Pasadena. I can never remember what the S is, but the Wilkes-Barre, the Astoria, and the Pasadena, I forget what the S was. They were one of the first groups to actually run into kamikaze at the end of the war in the Pacific. And so they were on full media blackout, all that. So that would be another one I think would be a little bit more off the beaten track that people would like. But it doesn't matter what you are into. There's something on this list. I mean, the fact that we have to have the whole thing in front of us shows you how big it is,
right.
Which is great.
45 stops.
Yeah. It is really great. It's 45 stops. I'll add something about the USS Wilkes-Barre is it still exists today. It's a coral reef off the coast of Key West, and Congressman Dan Flood went down there with his beautiful wife, Catherine, and watched it get sunk.
I've heard that story.
Yeah, there's a photo of him out on the water in a boat at Key West, Florida. One of the things that I love to talk about is cemeteries, and there's actually a word for people who like cemeteries called a taphophile. And we have 4 cemeteries on this list. The 44th Cemetery, which is the oldest cemetery in Luzerne County, 1776. We have Hanover Green Cemetery, which is the second oldest cemetery in 1777. And then we have the splendid Grand Hollenbach Cemetery, which is a little bit later, 1855. But what is wonderful and remarkable about it is there used to be a cemetery where City Hall is today, and all those bodies got reinterred in either the Wilkes-Barre City Cemetery, the public cemetery, or next door, the private cemetery at Hollenbach. And there are 15 Revolutionary War veterans that are buried in Hollenbach Cemetery, and we will be doing a tour of them as well the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend. What I love about those 3 big dominant cemeteries is as you stroll through the tombstones and the mausoleums, you instantly see every single street name in the Wyoming Valley. Mm-hmm. You know, you see, I think most people realize there's a Butler Street in practically every single town in a Butler township, but you'll see Swetland Street, you'll see Denison Street. In Hollenbach, we have Hollenbach Street and whatnot. So
Rudder Ave.
It's right, Rudder Ave. There's so many names. They all are there engraved on those tombstones.
And so many people that drive by them every day might not know the history of why it's named. And so doing a cemetery tour like Tony offers with the Preservation Society is a great way to learn about such things. I've done your tour, and first of all, Tony makes it fun too, because he'll tell you funny anecdotes about the deceased, and so
they can't come back at me.
Yeah,
no. If you ever wanted as close to a Real Housewives episode, but in a cemetery, because people love dirt. I mean, it's smart,
Social gossip.
Yeah.
And you talk about the history of the region, and I know that we have some friends that are over there at the I-Room trying to turn that into a museum, and we're all supporting those efforts. And when I talked to them about it, I learned a lot about things that I didn't even know. As somebody who loves local history, who's worked on some films on local history in the past, I wasn't even aware that the farms of the Wyoming Valley were very responsible for feeding the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. We don't think of the valley as farms because it's been developed into a city now for so long, but 250 years ago, the people that were planting here were helping win the Revolutionary War.
Well, I'm sure some people I remember, but people definitely who are a little bit older than me will still remember Barney Farms, right? Barney Farm was a farm when we were kids, and then turned into a BMX bike place for a while. And of course, Barney Farms did exist where Wilkes University's track and field are today. But you're right, when you go up and down what we call the Great Road, Wyoming Avenue, it is just one farm after the other. And I'm sure Mark and I think the same way. When you go to Kingston Corners, you're at the Butler Farm. Yeah. And then as you go up Wyoming Avenue, you go to the Dorrance Farm. Then the next farm up is the Pettibone. The next one after that is Atherton, and then Shoemaker. And then you hit the Wyoming Monument. Yeah. So there's... Instead of 50 blocks, we think in terms of 4 or 5 farms.
Yeah, and the Battle of Wyoming was on the Schooley Farm.
On the Schooley Farm.
And originally, even before, we're talking about the 250th, of course, 1776, it's the anniversary of America, but even before that, in the 1760s, when this area was settled, when it was still Connecticut, it originally was going to be farms, because Connecticut proper, mainland Connecticut, is very rocky, very sandy, whereas here, even today, you can grow anything. I mean, how many people, if you're listening to this, just think in your mind's eye, how many people do you know still do gardens around here today with, tomatoes and peppers and everything? I know a gentleman, he grows tobacco. He doesn't even smoke, but it's just the principle you can here. Whatever you want to grow here, you can grow here. And that's the way it was 250 years ago.
There's a reference about how we looked in a travel guide for the Reading Railroad. This is an 1858 travel guide. And it describes the Wyoming Valley as a New England town in the middle of Pennsylvania where all the houses are white with green shutters, flower beds in the front and gardens in the rear, and white steeple churches, of which that white steeple church they're referring to still exists, and that's Good Shepherd Lutheran at the corner of South Main Street and South Street.
You know, that's such an important part of our history that hopefully watching this podcast people will learn about and doing our trail. And I believe it was I'm certain it was an American 250 PA event up at the Rail Riders at Piazzine Field about 3 or 4 years ago when they were first starting to talk about that here. And I believe it was former Congressman Cartwright that pointed out, you know, we think about the coal mining and we think about fueling and heating homes. But Congressman at the time pointed out that those mines fueled the Industrial Revolution, which led to the United States basically winning 2 world wars. And so there's so many dots that you could connect here to Luzerne County in northeastern Pennsylvania that that's a perspective that some people might not have. Yeah, I didn't have that until it was presented to me, and my grandfather was a coal miner who had black lung and whose brother died in the mine. So I feel a connection to it. But I never felt that sense of maybe pride that we should have, that it was much more than just warming homes, that it was, you know, fueling an entire country's progress forward in a magnificent way.
Well, even before that, you know, during the Civil War, the North, in addition to a manpower advantage, we had an industrial advantage. There are some of Lee's writings where he talks about, as part of the Northern invasion, which ended up culminating in Gettysburg, but if everything had gone successfully, he wanted to target the coal fields of the Susquehanna. Because 1, they didn't have any, but 2, he knew we were driving the Union war machine. So as far back as 1863, we were the hub of industrial progress.
General Lee should not have tried to come into Pennsylvania.
Not at all. And you can even go back to the Revolutionary War, where we have documentation that coal was sent down the Susquehanna to Carlisle for a munitions plant to make bullets and ammunition during the Revolutionary War. So I have an expression that I like to say: America would not be America without Wilkes-Barre.
Amen.
And that is the reason. It is the coal that we fueled the Industrial Revolution.
So many things that, you know, so we talk about the farms and how they spearheaded the Revolutionary War, and the coal mines, which helped spearhead the Industrial Revolution. And then I know, Tony, you talked about this in the film that we worked upon together 3 or 4 years ago with the Agnes flood. You know, the recovery was difficult for the folks. There wasn't a lot of organization, and that led to the Agnes Flood Recovery Act, which led to what we now know as FEMA.
Right.
And so the hardships that our grandparents and parents went through led to now having almost immediate and a rapid response from the federal government for times of natural disaster.
It's kind of amazing that we had a congressman named Flood, and we had the Agnes Flood.
And he helped design the blueprint for handling such things now much more effectively and better for the American people. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things that you could, like I said, connect the dots here. The Home Box Office is a fun one. The first jazz festival. Some of them are just fun. Agnes is a tough one, but some of them are just fun stories.
Another one I like is the little girl who learned her manners on Franklin Street and who wrote them in a book for the world to know, Emily Post, in her famous etiquette book. And it's boggling to my mind that more people don't know this, but that she was the second most influential woman in America after Eleanor Roosevelt by Time magazine in 1950. And she learned her manners on South Franklin Street, and her parents and grandparents and great-grandparents are all buried in Hollenbach Cemetery.
It's incredible. I know, working with you on the Luzerne County Arts and Entertainment Hall of Fame, you know, we have the grave in Hollenbach too for Florence Foster Jenkins.
Right, Florence Foster Jenkins.
Who was, you know, put on the national map about, I guess, 10 years ago with Meryl Streep, who played her in a really good movie. The movie was terrific. And so there's fun stories too amid all of some of the drama and the hardships that some of the miners went through, and certainly some of the people went through with Agnes. Now, when you talk about putting a trail like this together and shining the light on such things for people, how important do you both feel it is for people growing up in this region, or even new to this region who have just moved here, to be aware of such things? Because that's one of the things we're trying to do with our trail.
Well, I mean, it's definitely important because you should have a sense of pride, whether you were born here, raised here, whether you're new here. I mean, every location has their own identity, their own, tapestry that goes through it. Ours goes all the way back to the 1760s. And so, as cliche as it sounds, to know how we got here, you have to know a little bit of what came before. You have to know about Agnes. You have to know about, okay, the mines closed, and then we had a lot of dress factories and garment factories, and now they're closed. Now we're going into warehousing. You have to go through all of that. But more importantly than that, the way a lot of the education system today is built on standardized testing, and that has its advantages and its disadvantages. But what I've noticed, and Tony, I think you'll agree with me on this, is history is the one subject that kind of gets a little bit left behind, only because in the current standardized testing system, history now is mostly memorization. And that's not fun. I mean, I love history. Tony loves history. I don't like just sitting down and memorizing a bunch of dates and people and places. If you do it right, eventually you'll remember it, but you shouldn't just have to sit there and just memorize all this stuff. So it's important to have something like this, and to have something like the Butler House or the Swetland House, so you can be the other component. It's not just memorization. You also have the living component, the visual component to it, to help balance things out. So this is incredibly important, and I'm glad we were able to do it, and I'm glad we were able to tie it into the 250th, because you literally will never get a better opportunity. Right. So
yes, it is important. We're going to talk a little bit about 250 later. Tony, what are your thoughts on the importance of having a Visit Luzerne County History Trail?
So one of the things that I really like is when I look back at the extraordinary achievements of some very inspirational people and how they serve now as role models. So that's why I think it's so important for Mark and I to go into history classes, which we do on an often basis. I recently was just part of a team that wrote a history book for children, and we've been giving it away to all third graders in the Wilkes-Barre School District. But better yet, going there to explain it, read it to them, and then to say to them that in this book there's 20 different inspirational leaders that did extraordinary things. And I say to the kids, they sat in your seats. So do you want to be governor of Pennsylvania? Because a governor of Pennsylvania came right out of here. Do you want to be a Smithsonian artist like George Catlin? Well, George Catlin went to school here too. So for me, teaching history is also setting an example with the inspiration of great achievements by some of our ancestors.
Certainly. And you mentioned the Planter's Peanut Stop before, Mark, and I have to give you credit because I listened to your podcast that you did at the Historical Society a couple of years ago on Planter's Peanuts, and you talk about, fate. I mean, I highly recommend people to research that story, because a young man got off the wrong train. May have been right here in this building.
Yeah, could be.
A good chance it was here in this train station if he was coming from Jersey or New York.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this was the Central Railroad of New Jersey. And he gets off the wrong train, and he doesn't speak English. And a businessman from Public Square takes him under his wing for a little while till they could, no cell phones, no way to communicate. They take a while to track down, I believe it was his uncle in Scranton, and get him back with his family. Turns out he liked it more down here, working in the produce shop on the square. That guy used to roast peanuts to get the aroma, to get the people into his produce stand, and he realizes that he's more interested in the peanuts, the young man, and he forms Planter's Peanuts because he got off the wrong train.
Off the wrong train.
And to Tony's point, that's a story that I always relate to. I'm Italian, Riccetti, you don't get much more Italian than that. My great-grandfather came from Italy to work in the mines, but it was the same thing. He didn't speak English. I was a little kid when he passed away, but even then he spoke very broken English. He easily could have ended up in the wrong place, and, the Italian immigrant community in here took him in and guided him. So it was one of those things like, hey, that really hits home. I mean, that could have been a lot of us.
Yeah. I misspoke before. I meant the wrong stop. He was on the right train.
Right.
He was supposed to get off in Scranton. He got off in Wilkes-Barre. And all of a sudden, you talk about iconic. Well, when I was at the Smithsonian with my kids a couple of years ago, they had an entire wing dedicated to marketing. And Mr. Pina is in the Smithsonian as one of the most iconic marketing brands of all time. And so
there was a magazine article out a couple of years ago. I think it was in Good Housekeeping when that was still bigger, but they were rating the biggest marketing icons, and Mr. Peanut came in second. The only thing that beat it out was the Nike swoosh. And when you think about how big, Nike's on everything, but Mr. Peanut was number 2.
that's incredible.
You want to think of another national thing that we did, the forefront of Walmart. When you think of another rags to riches story, you have this guy, Fred Kirby and Charles Woolworth, 2 teenagers that meet in a store in Watertown, New York, happen to end up in Wilkes-Barre in the 1880s, open up a store together. Charles goes off to Scranton, and FM Kirby and Company starts, and then they hook back up together, and Charles brings his brother Fred, and then you have this enormous F.W. Woolworth and Company, the largest 5 and dime, completely changing the way you do retail marketing. And then all the extraordinary things that Mr. Kirby has left behind to this day. And that family is still contributing from their foundation to projects all over the Wyoming Valley.
Kirby Health Center, Kirby Park, FM Kirby Center.
Kirby Libraries.
Kirby Library.
Yep. Kirby Creative Center at Wyoming Seminary. Yep.
So you can learn about some of these things on the Visit Luzerne County History Trail, which is live now on our website. You go to visitluzernecounty.com and you can sign up. You'll get what's similar to an app on your phone. And just like the Pizza Trail did, you can check in. And as long as you visited one of the sites, and this is a little bit easier than the Pizza Trail and even the Ice Cream Trail, because on those trails it was a business. And we wanted you to go in and try the ice cream or the pizza, and so you were restricted to the business hours of that particular establishment. Well, you can swing by, any of these historical sites anytime that you want to, and go on the app and learn a little bit more about them and check in that you were there. And that leads, of course, to, just like our other trails, prizes. And so the more historical sites you visit, the bigger the prizes you get. And so we've got T-shirts, we've got caps, mugs, totes, stickers. We've got some great artwork, which you're probably going to see on the screen right now as I'm talking, because Kyle, who produces the podcast, does a great job of that. So, Kyle.
No pressure, buddy.
If you're seeing graphics right now, thank you, Kyle. And so, we're really looking forward to this trail. We're going to go on to about the middle of October with this one. And again, you can sign up at visitluzernecounty.com and get on the trail and start learning all about some of these great little tidbits that we've been talking about here with these 2 gentlemen. Now, I want to turn the conversation and talk a little bit about both of you, because when we were talking about doing the History Trail, although we all have an interest in it here at our office, I know Kyle does and I do, and Sheena does as well, sales and marketing director. You're the guys. And so we basically said, well, let's see if we could get Mark and Tony to come down and work with us on this. And so, again, I want to thank you for doing that.
It was real hard to convince us.
We don't like to talk.
No.
Well, it would not be, we wouldn't have 45 stops without you. So let's talk about both of you each as historians, because that's really what you are. And when that seed was first planted, especially for the seed with local history. Tony, I think you may have told me before it started at Valley West, but for those who aren't familiar with the story, when did it start for you?
So it actually started, I credit 3 women in my life, but the number one was a history teacher at Valley West that I had in 1980, so 46 years ago. Wow. So Mary Jean Tarantini, and you might remember her too, Alan.
I do.
So she sponsored National History Day when it started in 1980. But prior to that, she made her class write a local history paper. And I chose the Market Street Bridge. So I have been in love with that bridge for 46 years. I know exactly the names of the eagles because they're all engraved. And I encourage everyone to please, when you drive by the bridge, park at Kirby Park and walk over to the Wilkes-Barre side, then go back on the Kingston side and look at the inscriptions under that bridge. Perseverance, progress, prosperity, and patriotism. When I did that in 10th grade, that made me fall in love with local history. And then I found this book called The Certified History of Kingston Township. I always thought, wow, why is it called certified? And it has to go back to the Susquehanna Company days in the 1760s. And this book had a pull-out map. And I have really yet to ever meet a guy who can't do it's not like a map. And this map was pulled out from, it's 44, and it had all the names of the first 40 families. And I was just mesmerized by that because I lived on Butler Street in 44. And now I'm the curator of the Zebulon Butler House. It seems to be meant to be. So that's where my spark came. I majored in history at college, the University of Pennsylvania. And then I thought I was going to go to law school, didn't go to law school, and I ended up working for the Valley Forge Historical Society, the Grand Army of the Republic Civil War Museum and Library. These were all in Philadelphia. And then when I came home, I have been full-fledged in history for the last 23 years doing walking tours, and I have to give a shout out to my one of the lady who taught me all about architecture in Wilkes-Barre, Betsy Bell Condren. And I mentioned 3 ladies. The third lady is my great-grandmother. I think if you're, as a child, if you have a great-grandparent in your life, and your great-grandparent, like my grandmother, who I call Nana, would talk about her grandparents, you're going back 200 years, right? So this is a woman who was born in 1885 that I'm talking to as a 10-year-old in 1975, 74, and showing me birth certificates and marriage licenses and all that kind of stuff. So I put that together. Mary Jean Tarantini, my great-grandmother, whose name was Emily Brooks Davis, and Betsy Bell Condren. Those 3 women have inspired me and have kept me on this path of local history ever since.
Mark, I want to ask you the same question, but before I do, I think it's important to touch on what you just said about if you're fortunate enough to have those grandparents in your life, and some folks have their grandparents till they're in their 20s and 30s, and some folks lose them when they're 5, 6, 7 years old. And so, but if you're fortunate, ask them the questions. This just came up with me recently. I have an unusual middle name. My middle name is Kent, K-E-N-T. And someone asked me recently, like Superman, right? Right. Well, someone asked me recently, where'd you get that? Well, I'm a junior, so my father is passed and my grandmother is passed. So I have no idea. Mm-hmm. I don't know where she came up with that, but he was born in 45, so it was probably before Superman was popular, so I don't think it had anything to do with Superman. And so I don't really know where it came from, and I will probably never know because I didn't ask that question while they were here. And so think about those things in your own lives that you're curious about and ask the questions. Mark, on to you. When did you become interested in local history?
Well, local history was later. Now, my interest in history in general came when I was quite small, but it isn't nearly as poetic a story as Tony's, let's say. I was watching Indiana Jones, and I was like, I want to do that. Of course, when you're 4, you don't know the difference between history and archaeology and any of that, and you don't realize that none of that is, the way it works. But I was like, I want to do that. Coupled with the fact that I still am, and always will be awful at math. I hate math. Today is another day that I've not had to use algebra, which I think goes on 39 years. So So because of that, what's the polar opposite of math? History. And I like to read. And, I never had cable growing up. I don't think you did either, Tony. No. So, you read a lot when you only had 3 channels in the Valley for the longest time. You read a lot. And I got really into it. When I got into local history was actually when I went into college. Because, like Tony, I majored in history. I was lucky. I went to a very small college in Massachusetts, just outside of Salem, Massachusetts, called Endicott College. And Endicott, until the late 90s, was an all-girls school. And I went in 2005, so it had just become co-ed, so they were adding majors as we went. And I was part of the first group of students that graduated with history degrees. And it was actually interesting. My wife and I recently just moved, and I found when we were moving the program for my commencement. And in my mother's handwriting, she's gone through the pages of everybody that's listed, and she circled the history majors. And then on the last page, she just wrote only 5 with 3 question marks at the end. But that's the way it was. But there, when you're in just outside of Boston, when you're in the other cradle of liberty, we have Philadelphia in this area, you have Boston, you study the Revolution. I wrote my thesis on the Revolution. And when you're up there, Wyoming keeps coming up. The 24th Connecticut, the Battle of Wyoming, the Wyoming Massacre, the fact that we were not just feeding the Continental Army, we were sending food to besieged Philadelphia. That all kept coming up. And, when you're 18, 19, 20, 21, you're very impressionable. And I was like, well, hey, maybe I need to take a step back and really look at this with new eyes. And so after, when I was in college, I actually got a job for a couple summers at the Anthracite Museum in McDade Park. And that was where I started under John Fielding, who's still the curator up there. And then when I graduated, I ran into this guy. And we hooked up, and, I've been, like Tony, I've been engrossed in the field ever since, and still reading a lot. Although now, I've committed the cardinal sin. I'm on the ebooks now with this.
Oh, no.
I have committed the cardinal sin, but...
Well, you don't have to wear white gloves.
No, you don't have to wear white gloves, and my problem is I read a lot at night, and I fall asleep, and the book falls and hits me. You don't really have that with this, so... But no, But really, if I had to pinpoint it, it was being 4 years old and watching Indiana Jones. That's how it started.
So, we go back 18 years. Remember, you were an intern.
Yeah, I had hair.
Tony
didn't have a beard.
At that, at the 150th dinner that we
Yes.
had on the courthouse lawn for the County Historical Society.
And you were in your city guard uniform.
And I was wearing the First City Troop uniform, right? Walter Mitchell was playing E.L. Dana.
Yes, he was.
Remember that?
Yes, he was.
Tony worked at the Luzerne County Historical Society before he formed the Wilkes-Barre Preservation Society. And so when they talk about having worked together, that's
right.
what they're referring to for those that are watching and listening. And we've had some great... I was fortunate in college. I studied under Ed Hanlon.
Oh, yeah.
I studied under Sheldon Spear and Robert Janisoff at Luzerne County Community College.
Minor little figures.
These are some
published books.
Yeah, these are some, and so my interest, I think, stemmed at that time as well. We had to do an AV project. I was a history major myself in education, and I had to do an AV project, basically to prove in the classroom that you knew how to work a slide.
Oh gosh!
And so I did a little documentary on local history, and I went around with my camcorder, which was about this big at the time, and married those videos to patriotic music and narrated it. And I remember discovering some really cool little markers outside of the big one. There's one in Plains across the street from the gym in the supermarket there, and it's called Abbott's Rock, and it's literally on someone's front yard.
Yes,
right, on
and
North River.
There was a father and son who swam across the Susquehanna to escape the Wyoming Massacre, and they were tracked down by there, and they were killed there. And then we have Queen Esther's Rock, or the Bloody Rock, in was it West Pittston, Exeter?
It's right on. I think it's technically Exeter. But yeah, it's right on the line. Susquehanna Avenue.
And so you look at the Wyoming Monument, and then as I dug in a little bit deeper, I learned, well, there's even some more around there. Now they're doing what they call the First to Fall event in West Pittston.
Another cemetery.
Prior to the commemoration that they do. That they do this usually on July 3rd, and that is the first casualties of the Battle of Wyoming, which actually happened, I guess, the night before. And so people keep unpeeling and shedding more light on these great stories. And we've had some great historians, like I said. Yourselves are now a part of that fraternity, and we're so lucky to have you both here talking about what you do and the tours that you give. And I know you have some exciting things happening too, where you're going to be opening the new museum at some point.
Yeah.
But we just talked about how you first got interested, and I have this story here that I did about Tony 16 years ago when I was a reporter for the Times Leader. It was called Meet Tony Brooks, and it literally was the first time I met Tony Brooks.
You look better with a beard.
And I sat down with you in your office and I asked you a couple questions, and one of them was, what in your opinion is the most important aspect of local history? And your answer was, from colonial times, was the inability to effectively solve the Yankee-Pennamite conflict on the federal level. This led to showing the weakness of the Articles of Confederation, which led to the 1887 United States Constitution. It was talked about. Thomas Jefferson made mentions of it during deliberations on the U.S. Constitution. So again, another dot connected here to Northeast Pennsylvania. You want to elaborate on that a little bit, how important that may have been for that conflict not to have been resolved, which maybe led to the governing laws of this country today?
So Article 9 of the Articles of Confederation said if two states have a beef with each other, a boundary dispute, bring it to Congress. We will set up a court to adjudicate the issue. Well, the Supreme Court didn't exist yet, which this boggles my mind. We're the first test of Article 9. But what it also proved was the weakness of these articles, that founding document to govern America. And it proved to be so weak and ineffectual that the next up was the constitutional conventions. So to have a play in that, I find absolutely remarkable. And it's just a fascinating aspect of our local history.
And just to piggyback on that, I encourage everyone to go online and look up the Articles of Confederation, because with certain exceptions, they're kind of getting glossed over and all the 250th stuff. But Tony mentioned that we're Article 9. Article 9 is the only one really that's more than one or two sentences, because we didn't want a big government. We just got rid of the king and the monarchy and this large central government. So they're very vague, very vague. And then you get Article 9, which is almost a full page talking about setting up this court and this dispute. And then just, it was really funny because when they did the Council of Trenton, which Jefferson chaired, and that's why he talked about it in the Constitutional Convention, Connecticut didn't have any evidence because the vast majority of their evidence they had sent to London. Because prior to the Revolution, the Crown was going to rule on this dispute. Well, they actually had the audacity to write to Parliament and say, hey, can you send all that stuff back? Which you can imagine what the response was. So they kind of had to go hat in hand, empty-handed, and say, hey, Parliament ate my homework. But that's why I always say, and I get some strange looks sometimes, we were Connecticut, and technically we still should be Connecticut. I love Pennsylvania, don't get me wrong, but yeah.
We are still Westmoreland.
Yes, we are still the great county of Westmoreland.
Tony, another question I asked you that day 16 years ago. What should we know about the guys after whom Wilkes-Barre is named? And your reply was John Wilkes was a champion of freedom of the press, and Isaac Barre coined the term the Sons of Liberty. Remember the charge, no taxation without representation? Wilkes and Barre, as Whig members of Parliament, would get up and say, yes, those Americans are right. That was a tough thing for them to do.
Very tough for thing to do. Now, if you go onto the campus of Wilkes University, go by Farley Library, you will see a statue of John Wilkes. And it is a replica of the original, which is right on the corner of the Bank of England in London, because John Wilkes was Lord Mayor of London, besides being a member of Parliament. And I'm just so glad that a Wilkes alum stumbled upon this statue and had it recreated. But on the bottom, it is engraved, Champion, Freedom of the Press. And the right of people to elect their own representative. Now, why is that there? John Wilkes and George III didn't like each other very much. And George III would say, wait a minute, you got elected? No, you didn't. Get out of here. So you just kind of imagine that happening in America today. So I find that really fascinating. And Isaac Barre, I will pronounce his name in the French way since he was a French Huguenot, though born in Ireland. His coin, Sons of Liberty, and one of our founders, besides Zebulon Butler, a guy named John Durkee, who was the heads of the Sons of Liberty in Connecticut, fought side by side and knew Isaac Barre from the French and Indian War, and that's how we were named. So glad we're not Durkeeville or Durkee Butler.
Well, and it's
Although Wilkes-Barre would sound
Wilkes-Barre.
Wilkes-Barre. That was such an insult at the time to the crown. Because this area was fiercely patriotic. And so to name a city after these two major opponents of the crown, I'm trying to think of some like a comparison for today, and I can't do. I mean, just the level of vulgarness and, you know, metaphorically raising a middle finger to the crown. That's what that was.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's interesting about patriots. 90% of the residents of the Wyoming Valley were patriots during the Revolution. When you go to New York, you can have 50% Tories. When you go to a place like Philadelphia, the old saying in Philadelphia was a third were Tories, a third were patriots, and a third I don't care.
Third was who was winning.
Right. And so, but us, I mean, that's why we're named Wilkes-Barre after John Wilkes and Isaac Barre. And it shows actually a lot of our place names too.
Mm-hmm. What about the history of the name Luzerne for the county?
Chevalier de la Luzerne.
Right, and César Chevalier de la Luzerne. So he was the French ambassador during the Revolution. He was quite the party guy, I like to say. Yeah. And if any of people can remember HBO's John Adams.
I knew you were going to say this.
The Chevalier de la Luzerne is portrayed, shall we say, way over the top with white painted face.
Flamboyant.
Yes, flamboyant. And he's making fun of John Adams because he doesn't speak French.
So a colorful story there.
Another colorful
whether
story.
that was exaggerated or not.
Oh.
Probably was.
Well, it was exaggerated somewhat, but he and Ben Franklin were friends, and
there's the party
Franklin got into he
got
got into enough. I think in the John Adams series, aren't they both in a hot tub at one point? The Chevalier and John, and Ben Franklin. So it's if you go back, I think it's actually
and a few
on
women,
HBO
not together.
Max. Well, yes, with women as well. But I'm remember like, isn't that supposed to be the Chevalier? Oh yeah, okay. It's on. I think it's on HBO Max. So if you have that, look that up, and then you can giggle when they pop up.
Let's talk about both of your respective organizations. We'll start with you, Mark, since the Luzerne County Historical Society goes back a long time.
Yes.
When was it founded?
We were founded in 1858. We are the oldest county historical society in Pennsylvania. And currently we have 6 locations that we administer. We have the Nathan Dennison House in 44. We have the Swetland Homestead in Wyoming. We have our administrative offices are in Wyoming in the Darling House, which was named after the Dart family, descendants of the Swetlands who helped us restore it, but also was the caretaker's house, the farmhand's house for the Swetland home for a long time. We recently purchased the former St. Cecilia's Parish in Exeter, which that church building itself only dates to 1977 because the original church burned down and was rebuilt, but the parish itself is over 100 years old. So we're pretty excited about that connection. We're in the process of restoring that. That's going to be our new historical community center. But our main locations that I think people are familiar with are in downtown Wilkes-Barre, not terribly far from where we're sitting. We have the Bishop Memorial Library next to the Westmoreland Club and next to St. Stephen's. And then we have the Luzerne County Museum directly behind the Oosterhout Library. And that, of course, was built at the behest of Isaac Oosterhout, because like most good organizations, we were founded in a bar. We were founded in Fell's Tavern, and for the longest time, we had rooms above the bar. That was our space. And Isaac Oosterhout was kind of like, that's not the best place for the public to go. So he bequeathed us the museum building, which was built in 1893, and we have been there ever since. Combined, fun little trivia fact, since we rolled over to 2026, combined, all 6 of our buildings are 926 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Wow.
So it's a fun little thing there. And, you know, we do tours at the Sweatland and the Denison. We keep exhibitions up at the museum, currently working on one for the 250th. And then the Bishop Library, you can come in and do research. All of our places are open to the public. Primarily in the summer, the library is used by genealogists.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
That's
such a popular thing.
It's
with
incredibly popular. We're lucky we have a lot of resources. Because Tony was talking about, you know, your grandparents and your great-grandparents, they go back so far in the back. Well, they also have their parents' stuff. Like, you have some of your parents' stuff. I have some of my parents' stuff. You have some of your parents' stuff. And they have their parents' stuff, and they have their parents' stuff. So when we were founded in 1858... our founders had all their parents' stuff and grandparents' stuff, which was from the late 1700s. Mm-hmm. And we're lucky enough that we still have that. There's been some floods, obviously. There's been a few incidents. We moved a few times. But overall, we still have the bulk of the collection. Between all 6 sites, we have just over 260,000 items. And the vast majority are available for the public to utilize. There's a few very fragile items or oversized items that we don't let the public look at, but that is an incredible minority. The vast majority of our collection is available for the public to use.
And like Mark said, for those that are doing ancestry research, that's a wonderful resource as well.
Yes, if you're doing ancestry research, if you're doing building research, business research. I had a woman call me yesterday. She's researching her church parish. We have church records, baptismal records, that sort of thing. We have cemetery records. So chances are, if you're researching something local and old, chances are we can help you.
A great resource for you. And what's your website, Mark?
LuzerneHistory.org is our website. We're also on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Threads. We're on Twitter. Please, God, don't make any more social media because I'll get stuck making that. Kyle, I think, is aggressively nodding behind the camera there. But yeah, you could just, if you look up Luzerne County Historical Society, we all come up. So.
And Tony, the Wilkes-Barre Preservation Society.
Yep. So the Wilkes-Barre Preservation Society, it got its start in 2003, and it started with architectural walking tours. The co-founders are Harry Haas, who's a present-day Luzerne County councilman, Betsy Bell Condren, and Lisa Griffith, who was playing a Victorian woman for those tours. So we have been doing architectural walking tours since 2003. And Hollenbach Cemetery tours and Luzerne County tours. And those tours, if anyone wants to contact me for a private tour, I love giving tours to Boy Scouts and Girl Scout troops and elementary school children so we can pass down these stories.
The courthouse.
And the courthouse. And then, so I live on Ross Street in downtown Wilkes-Barre, and around the corner from me is the oldest house in Wilkes-Barre, the Zebulon Butler House. And I got a call from a friend of mine, a neighbor, saying, "Oh my gosh, there's demolition trucks here." We immediately rushed to this property, and a local chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution actually guarded the house until we can find the owner and stop the demolition. Wow. And we did. And we purchased the house outright. And it is, and I've been lucky enough to know the last descendants, and I'm still in contact with Butlers about their family materials. But there was a gentleman named John Lord Butler, who was 5th great grandson of Zebulon Butler, and he was kind enough to give me a ton of material. And he's since passed. He's buried in the Stoddartsville Cemetery, which is one of the stops on our history tour, probably at a very unlikely place that people would even know because you drive by it on 115, but people are certainly go there, and there's a little museum there. So what we have done now is we've been collecting from Butler family, but we concentrate on the people who lived in the original 50 town plots of downtown Wilkes-Barre when the town was laid out by the Susquehanna Company. We're also concentrating on the 4 generations of the Butler family that lived in the house. And I have, just because, I'm sure the same way, eBay is a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
And if you, it's kind of like gambling. You just keep putting a quarter in it and pulling the machine. You just find so much cool Wilkes-Barre stuff. And I have a vast collection of Wilkes-Barre items. So that's also on display as well. And we've been fortunate to have some really nice donors that have given us stuff to build this. So we concentrate on the Zebulon Butler House. That gives us a home and a space. People can come and see it anytime they want. Just give me a call. And the architectural, we're really heavy on the public history and the preservation of architecture, which leads us to our second big major project, a little baby that we gave birth to. And this also shows you how Facebook can go viral. I made a comment about, hey, let's save IRM Temple on Facebook. And that comment got on the front page of the Times Leader, where I invited anybody to come to my apartment. And 35 people showed up. And that created the IRM Temple Restoration Project, which is now preserving IRM Temple.
That is a wonderful project that, if it comes to fruition, which I think we all believe it will, will properly showcase several components of American history. I know Christian Weiland, I've spoken about, there will be a Native American history, industrial history, and revolutionary history. And that is the plans for that building, as well as a live music venue as well. Right. And so it's an amazing building, and compliments to you on being at the forefront of
it's the only one of its
structure.
kind in America. It does not, that's it. There is no even comparable. So we have something unique, and that's what every community seeks to do. What is our one thing that makes us unique? And obviously IRM Temple is one of them, Pliner's Peanuts is one of them, Cole is one of them, Jasper Wright, who is the first black man to be a lawyer in the state of Pennsylvania and a Supreme Court justice in South Carolina. He is one of them. So there are certain things, and that's what we concentrate on.
And the preservation, they also, every year, you recognize someone in the community for their preservation work. I know that a couple of years ago, our train station here was recognized, George Albert, who restored the building, received the award. And you give that off to someone each year. Correct.
We've done 5 so far. We've awarded King's College, their Christ the King Chapel, and the old Springbrook Water Company building, which is now their engineering department. And by the way, Christ the King's Chapel, which is the old Memorial Church, is on this list. And the one thing that you need to see in that chapel is Edgar Patience 4-ton coal altar. Incredible work by this Black Wilkes-Barrean who was wonderful in the work that he did with coal. We gave awards to our most recent one to the Abigail Slocum Butler House, another Butler. One of our board members, Joel Zatoski, and his wife Ronnie Kurlanchik, restored this house at 123 South Franklin Street. Did a phenomenal job, put a house back on the market. It was empty for many, many years. And the interesting story is Wilkes was going to buy it. They called me and said, if you can find a buyer, go right ahead. If we buy it, sad to say, we'll knock it down. And luckily, we found a buyer for that, got restored, and we gave it an award.
And that was nice of Wilkes to do that, too.
Oh, absolutely.
To offer you that opportunity. And I know you talked about saving the Butler House and literally having, the Daughters of Liberty protecting it. And I remember you telling me that the money that you needed to raise happened really fast.
Oh, it actually happened over a weekend.
Yeah.
Right. So another component to
Which
that.
just shows you how passionate people are about these things.
So the Downtown Residents Association, which is a 25-year organization, is really committed. They all know each other. They have a monthly party that they go to everyone's house. I basically went door to door downtown and raised the money to purchase that house in a weekend.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And now here we have it, and it's the home of the Wilkes-Barre Preservation Society. And as Tony said, some of the great collectibles that he's been able to acquire over the years on display there. You mentioned eBay, and that actually led to our movie. Because when I first met Tony at the end of the interview, tape recorder's off, and I'm leaving. I go, hey, you know, Tony, I'm trying to get my kids some of those old Agnes Flood books, you know, like the old yearbook style. And I said, I don't know where to get them. And he literally said, I got mine on eBay. Yep. And I said, really? And I literally went home that night and bought all 3 of them. The Trouble with Agnes, The Wrath of Agnes, and
Great Flood.
And the Great Flood of 72. Great. And then looking at all those pictures, said, man, we should put all these together somewhere. And that led to us working on the Agnes documentary. And so eBay, if you didn't like our movie, blame eBay.
That's right.
And if you did like our movie, thank eBay.
And I can complete the set. I got my 3 off eBay.
Did you get yours off the site?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so we're 3 for 3 on that. There
you know, I mean, it's great. And I'll have now, because of this position, you know, you'll have people who'll send us a link sometimes of some really neat Mr. Peanut stuff out there.
Yes.
Yes. If you're a
literally anything you can think of, they have made with Mr. Peanut on it.
And there's some hardcore collectors of
Yes.
Peanut stuff. They have conventions and everything. Yeah.
You were talking about a level of passion. Years ago, we did at the Historical Society a Planters Peanuts exhibition. And we did it, the collecting group is called the Peanut Pals. And they're actually worldwide. They're this hardcore group of collectors, and they have a big convention every year. Well, that year it was going to be in Wilkes-Barre. And so we said, okay, we're going to open the exhibit. We'll do the opening the same weekend as the convention, blah, blah, blah. And we put a thing in the paper saying if anyone has anything to loan us, you know, we would look at it, we would consider it. And this exhibition was there had to be 1,000 items. I mean, every inch of the museum was stuffed. You know how many of our actual items that weren't on loan, you know how many were in the exhibition? 3.
Wow.
3. Everything else was on loan, which the paperwork was rough at the end, but it was a great exhibition. I mean, this area is incredibly passionate about their history and about their heritage, and so we're very lucky to be able to draw into that for different
I think that's
things.
a long-term goal for Luzerne County, is to get a collection like that on a permanent display and have a Planters Peanut Museum here. I know it's something I've had some talks with some people about. We do have some people here in the area, you mentioned, who are pretty serious collectors. And it'd be something we'd love to pull together someday. We've talked about it a little briefly before, and this is the last thing I want to talk about today. Is the America 250 PA? You know, I've been working with them now for about 4 years. We were proud to sponsor the planting of the Liberty Tree on the grounds of the Wyoming Monument. That was 2 years ago now. I think we did that in 2023, 2.5 years ago. We are sponsoring the Bells Across PA, and so we have a beautiful bell here in our lobby, which Kyle Stratton from our staff painted. And so we are on their trail, and we sponsored their kickoff event at the courthouse last week as well. And so we are very involved because we feel it's important. And the reason that I feel it's important, and I've talked about this a little bit, is because being old enough now to remember the bicentennial in 1976, I just remember that I didn't have the perspective at the time of how important it was to the country because I was too young.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, this is fun, you know, and the parades and the fireworks and all they even had toys for, you know, you could buy Revolutionary Soldiers and redcoats, and getting caught up in all that as a you know, an 8-year-old and learning more about the founding fathers and Jefferson and Washington at that time was the perfect time to pique your interest. As I got older and I looked back on it, I realized what was going on in the country, and that we are 2 years removed from Watergate, and that we are 1 year removed from the fall of Saigon in Vietnam. And that maybe morale boost that the country got from the bicentennial was probably way more important than I realized as an 8-year-old. And so that's part of the reason that I think it's so important, is that a celebration like this could really bring people together. Yeah. And remind people that we are the greatest country in the world, and that we are the greatest country that ever existed. So that's my little tirade on PA 250. What are your thoughts on this?
I was going to put the flag behind, like in Patton. Yes, put the flag behind.
You know, that's sincerely how I feel about it, and of course the fact that I love history. and particularly American colonial history. And so, what are your thoughts on this great celebration that our own Cassandra Coleman from right here in Luzerne County has been working on for 7 or 8 years now?
It's a great time for reflection, and we need to remember, and you have the Ken Burns documentary, and you have a lot of the PA 250 events and the America 250 events that are talking about this, but it bears repeating over and over again that our government, whether it was the Articles of Confederation or the Constitution, it was an experiment. No one knew whether or not it would work. The Articles of Confederation didn't work. We were talking about that. They had to rewrite it. No one knew if democracy could be sustainable. We fought basically a second revolution in the War of 1812. Almost immediately afterwards, we had the Civil War, World War I, World War II, which, again, World War I was democracies against monarchies. World War II was democracy against fascism. So it's been an enduring experiment. So I think it's important to remember that and to appreciate the fact that, yes, this is a celebration of the fact that we're still here 250 years later. Yes, there's good and bad of all history. It shouldn't just be all one side or the other. But if you had gone to the Constitutional Convention and told them that we'd be sitting here in 2026 celebrating America still, I think a lot of the men in that room would be surprised. They'd be happy, but I think a lot of them would be surprised.
So William Penn said we were a holy experiment.
Yes.
And as a Westmorelander, I can't stand, I'm going to mention William Penn's name. And that,
you didn't even choke on it. I'm so proud of you.
And that experiment continued through the 1860s when a ragtag bunch of farmers and a couple merchants from the bigger cities led a political experiment against a monarch and a whole new way of governing ourselves. And to talk about democracy in action and its birth from America and the problems with it. What did Ben Franklin say when the woman said, "What did you do in that Independence Hall, the State House?" And she said, "We gave you a democracy if you can keep it." Well, we kept it, and we're still going to keep it. We lived through the War of 1812, right? Another second civil war for America with us in Britain, and then our Civil War. A real civil war where 600,000 of us got murdered in the North and the South, and all the events that happened in the 1960s with civil rights, and now the discussions that we have today. But democracy is enduring. 250 years we've kept it. We're going to keep it again for another 250 years.
Yeah, it's not going away.
Not going away.
If we can quote an Englishman, but one who was granted American citizenship, if we can quote Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst form of government except for every other one that has ever been tried.
Exactly.
Good point.
Gentlemen, that's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you again for helping us with the Visit Luzerne County History Trail. Again, sign up at visitluzernecounty.com. And thank you both for the work you do with the Wilkes-Barre Preservation Society and the Luzerne County Historical Society. All of us here in the community, we appreciate what you do very much, and we thank you for joining us here today on the show.
And I know I speak for Tony. If you see us at any 250 events, come up and say hi. We just hate to talk. So.
This is the easiest podcast I ever hosted.
Very good.
Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time.